This is Discovering the Scriptures with Dr. Peter John Parisis. We are currently in Daniel chapter 2, verse 34. Reading from the King James Version first, quote, "Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces," unquote. Now, looking at the Interlinear Bible, the raw translation, quote, "Without, outside, a stone was cut out, while, until, you watched, looking, and clay, iron of its feet, on image thee, and which struck hands them, and broke in pieces," unquote. Now, reading the Young's Literal Translation, quote, "Thou wast looking till that a stone hath been cut out without hands, and it hath smitten the image on its feet, that are of iron and clay, and it hath broken them small," unquote. Reading this in context, this verse is from the paragraph starting with Daniel chapter 2, verse 31, and going down and finishing through Daniel 2, verse 35. Reading from the King James Bible, quote, "Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, and his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them in pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth," unquote. Let's go ahead and look at the parsing of this to see what we can find out there before we go any further. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out. Well, let's parse out the Aramaic word for was cut out. It's a ithpiel stem. And what does that mean? It means that it is expressing a reflective action. And it's a perfect aspect, so it means it's completed. So he is reflecting upon a completed action. That a stone was cut out without hands, which smote. Now let's parse out this word, which smote. PL stem, so casual, perfect aspect, complete. So it's a casual, perfect, completed aspect. Which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake. Now I want to go ahead and define and break and see what is said as far as its definition goes in translation. It says to break into pieces, fall into pieces, be shattered, is what it says on this one. So shattered, break. It's not just a break, it's complete shattering is what's going on here. Because once you shatter those feet, or break them, it's going to fall, shatter everything into chunks, maybe worse, and break them to pieces. Now let's do the Aramaic word for to pieces, and it is a APL stem, perfect aspect, so it is a causative conjunction that is complete. Now that ends the parsing of this verse. Let's dig into this, because this is going to be good. There is a lot of symbolism that's going on here in this verse. So let's take a look at it. First of all, let's take a look at what is here and what is not here. So now let's look at the verse for what is there and what is not. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands. Alright, we have a stone that was cut out without hands. We're not told where the statue is being seen at. We don't know if the king is looking at the statue next to a mountain. We don't know if it's on the plain. We don't know where the statue is, except he doesn't mention water. Water would be another problem with the statue standing because of the clay. It would dissolve it. And this, of course, has been fired. So here we are. We're looking at the statue. We have no idea where it's been positioned at. But we do have a stone now that was cut out without hands. Is this a boulder that's rolling down a hill, on a hill, about to be rolled down? Could be in danger, the statue be in danger of this boulder, like we see on avalanches of snow. It looks good, and at one point you might do or say something, snap a twig, whatever, and then boom, the avalanche takes place and the snow comes a-falling. We're not told. We just know that as you continue on, which smote the image. So we know that this rock, whatever size this stone is, it's going to hit this image and break it into pieces. That's all we know. But now let's remember that when David fought against Goliath, he took a pebble and a sling to get past the Goliath's armor bearer and the armor that Goliath was wearing and get into his temple and kill him. A small rock, a big giant, and killed him. Because we don't know at all how big this rock was, it could be a pebble. It could be a gigantic boulder. We're not told. But what we are told is that it hit this statue. It hit the clay for sure and broke that in pieces, because that's the easiest thing to break. But we do know that it broke it in pieces. It tells us this. We really can't go much further than that on this verse, because we don't have it in this verse to tell us. All we know is that we have to look at not only the verse, but also what's not there. We know that this rock was not formed by human hands. It was not cut out. So that means that this rock was either there and placed there by God, happened to be there, and the wind blew it down. We just know that it was cast without hands. So it's by God, or the force is by God or allowed by God. And then it smote the feet that were iron and clay and break them in pieces. Notice it doesn't hit the gold and silver. It hits the iron and clay on the statue. Why? Well, the verse doesn't tell us, so you're going to have to stay tuned so we can find out, does the rest of the verses tell us in this chapter what's going on? Does it apply only to Nebuchadnezzar, or does it have implications for us? Stay tuned. Now let's go ahead and look at the commentaries on this verse and see what we have available. John Gill, quote, "Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands," or was seen. The king continued looking upon the image that stood before him, as he thought, as long as he could see it, till he saw a stone, an emblem of the Messiah, as it often is in Scripture. See Genesis 49, verse 24. Reading from the King James Bible, quote, "But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel." Unquote. Continuing, "Because of his strength, firmness, and duration. And so it is interpreted here by many Jewish writers, ancient and modern, as well as by Christians, and also of his kingdom or of him in his kingly office. See Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. Reading from the King James Bible, quote, "And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever." Unquote. Continuing on, in an ancient book of theirs, written by R. Simeon ben, I'm going to spell the last name, Jochai, the author interprets this stone, cut out of the mountain without hands, to be the same with him who is spoken of in Genesis chapter 49:24, which we read, is called the shepherd and the stone of Israel, as it is by, I'm going to spell the name, capital Saadiah, capital Gaon, a later writer, and in another of their writings, reckoned by them very ancient, it is said that the ninth king, for they speak of 10, shall be the King Messiah, who shall reign from one end of the world to the other, according to that passage, quote, "the stone which smote the image," unquote, etc., in Daniel 2:35, and in one of their ancient midrashes or expositions it is interpreted of the King Messiah, and so R. Abraham Sebed on those words, quote, "from thence is the shepherd, the stone of Israel," unquote, found in Genesis 49:24, observes the King Messiah does not come but by the worthiness of Jacob, as it is said, quote, "thou sawest till the stone cut out without hands, because of Jacob," unquote. That is said to be cut out without hands. That is, the hands of men, of capital Saadiah and capital Jacchiades. Explain it. I'm taking a footnote here. I'm spelling these names because I want to make sure that you have them available to look up with the correct spelling. Now, I could pronunciate them, but you would not be able to spell them. I'm giving you the spelling, so if you want to look them up even further, you have the correct spelling to do so, because I'm here to provide you tools. Continuing on, explain it. Not cut out by workmen as stones usually are out of quarries, but was taken out by an unseen hand and by an invisible power, even purely divine. This may point out at the wondrous incarnation of Christ, who was made of a woman, of a virgin, without the help of a man, by the power of God. See Hebrews chapter 8, verse 2. Reading from the King James Bible, quote, "a minister of the sanctuary, and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, and not man," unquote. Continuing on, "and at his kingdom, which was like a single stone at first, very small, and was cut out and separated from the world, and set up and maintained, not by human, but divine power, in being of a spiritual nature." 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 1. Reading from the King James Bible, quote, "For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God, an house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens," unquote. Continuing on, "which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces." This seems to represent this image as in a plain, when, from a mountain hanging over it, a stone is taken by an invisible hand and rolled upon it, which falling on its feet breaks them to pieces, and in course the whole statue falls and is broken to shivers. This respects what is yet to be done in the latter day, when Christ will take to himself his great power and reign and subdue and destroy the 10 kings or kingdoms that are given to Antichrist and him himself, and the remainder of the several monarchies, and which they will all end. Unquote. Now I want you to understand that when I'm looking at these verses, I pray before I come to these verses. I read the text to you. I don't even sit down and prepare. I sit down, I read the scripture to you. I parse it out to you. I see what is there, and I tell you what I see and understand from everything we're looking at. It is only then that I look at the commentaries. I put this recording on pause, and I look at the commentaries to see what is there that is worthy to be put in, and then I read them. And as you can see, when I did the first part, and then I did the second part, so everything I did before the commentaries, and the second part looking at the commentaries, and I read you the one that I found to be the most fascinating, it coincides. In fact, it even goes further. It talks about this representing the Messiah, which is something Daniel does. That's why Daniel is so important. He gives us information for the end times, the latter days. He gives us information of what to expect. That's why this book is so important. Now, I did Daniel as my second book in this audio commentary because God told me to. I did James 1 because I enjoyed that book and memorized the first chapter when I was a teenager. So I did James 1 because I just enjoyed it. Daniel was given to me by God to do as a second book. And I thought later, as I was starting to read it, how fascinating it is that he gave this book before Revelations, before any other book. And now as we're going through it, we're seeing a lot. Because the commentaries go back, oh my gosh, like 1900 years? Because I even looked up the commentaries from the ancient fathers on this. And we're seeing that what is there has been written in the commentaries and more. We're getting some insights. We're getting some questions in our mind. Does this apply? Is this part of the scripture? Only time will tell, and only you will be able to make that determination. May God richly bless you as you continue to study the scriptures. God bless.